Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic challenge videos, or I like to call them my own personal prison. Yesterday I'm back once again playing KOTOR 2, except this time I'm doing the opposite of my last challenge. So in this video I'm going to be absolutely embodying Star Wars, which is basically the Force. Can I beat Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2 with only using the Force? And before I get any more commenting, well, Force Storm is one of the most overpowered builds in the game. Everyone knows how strong the Force is. Well, you are underestimating how much I clearly hate myself and want myself to suffer, since I'm going to be playing a light-sided character. So the rules: I can only do damage with enemies using the Force. I can only pick universal or light-sided powers unless I max out on them, and then I can pick dark side just to level up, but I cannot use them. My companions are also forced to follow these rules, apart from when it's impossible. Companions in my party are also allowed to use their fists, since I can't be bothered to control the AI 24/7, since it would just become ridiculous. But apart from that, let's begin. So I start with making a man who is about as mentally stable as me after doing all these previous challenge videos. I talk to the one woman who's going to hate this challenge more than anyone else before doing my usual speedrunning conversations.
Fine.
And then I quickly run into the first issue of the game, since I don't have any force powers until I reach level 2, so I can't actually kill any of the droids, but luckily you can just run to the terminal and turn them all off. I then meet Atten, who I'm going to build completely wrong for this challenge, since I didn't understand how a certain feat works in this game. Moving on to T3, since he's just a droid, he can just kill anything like normal, since otherwise this area isn't going to get done. But rules are rules, so we quickly kill him for doing this. Returning to my XR, I make my way to the mines, where I program a droid to assist me, since technically it isn't companion, so he isn't breaking any of the rules. I follow that up by using the computer here in order to get the droids to kill each other, since I need XP, because there's no way for me to kill things quickly. I meet the less impressive HK50 before having to use him to open the password for the computer. I'm rewarded with my slowest gameplay ever with getting given the longest cutscene in the entire game. I will always make that joke at this section because I hate it so much and I want everyone to know how miserable it is. After doing that though, you can see how exciting my gameplay is, since I have to constantly hide from droids in order to recover my force powers in order to try and kill them. I generally got to the point where I was that miserable and bored of waiting constantly, I decided to just run past all the droids, and you can just see in the background just how awful it truly was. Luckily for me, I know that this will be a snowball build, since it will start off very weak, but hopefully by the end of the game I will be super strong. The question is, will I be ending my own life before I even get to that point? When I reunite with Kreia, it's taken me about an hour just to get to this part of the game, which is absolutely ridiculous. I do get to do the best part of the planet though by picking up Atten, before learning that the HK droid can actually heal himself if you don't kill him quick enough, which was one of the worst things I've ever seen. In the Harbinger, I actually abandoned my party members and forced them to stand so I can force my way through a load zone, since I'm far too weak to kill any of the assassins, especially since they have lightsabers. And speaking of exploits, I used a Kolto tank repeatedly to revive myself, and I can't lie, I think I used this about 20 to 30 times just to get through this area. Honestly, this was by far the worst planet for gameplay, and honestly, I'm just going to skip through it. I simply send Kreia to go be killed by a man made of stone before picking up my own autistic dog. And when I get to the Ebon Hawk, it's just taken me shy of 2 hours, which is a good 50% longer than it should do. But like I said, I'm hoping this snowballs, so there's a bit of hope and a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just whether that tunnel is going to cave in on me. But I'm rewarded with Telos, and I knew this was going to be one of the worst planets, 1 because I hate it, but 2 because I'm still so goddamn weak. So my plan was just to push through as quickly as humanly possible. And it started with me and Kreia pushing this man to death. I side with the Euphorians, 1 because they're light side, but 2 because it's actually the quicker story, even if it is by a few minutes. Every second counts. I make my way to the merchants, and they only sell dark side items, which is foreshadowing for all the items I'm going to be getting in this run. I decided to save the ugly man from the mercenaries, and by saved I mean I also got beaten down like their new victim and was proceeding to hide while the TSL officers actually spawned to kill them. I won't lie, this put the fear of God into me, mainly because if I thought every fight was going to be this bad, then I'm just never going to get off this planet. But with the fight with the droid, it actually goes quite well, since other NPCs are here to carry me quite quickly, and it was nowhere near as bad as the Merc fight. Naturally, I make my way over to Luxor and use the art of Rhythm with the Tism to get into the exchange. But before I do that, I start this alien, and sadly for me, Kreia and Glenn are part of the English Defence League, and they don't understand the Geneva Convention and keep attacking him once he surrendered. In the exchange base, the fight was actually that bad and long, this random man actually gave up fighting and just accepted his death. Like normal, however, I used Slusk to kill Luxor and her bloodborne hogs before convincing him to leave the hammerheads alone since I don't want to get into a fight with him. Fun fact, you can actually get this alien to tell you about his loan and his debt, and you can convince the Euphorian to give you a small loan to pay it off.
It's not been easy for me. It has not been easy for me. And, you know, I started off in Brooklyn. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million.
My reward for discovering new things is that I get to play the most exciting mission in the entire game. Obviously, the Euphorian fight takes so much longer than it should have because I'm always waiting for my force to recharge. This was a sign that I need to get to level 12 as quickly as possible since you get quicker force regen with one of the force forms. For context for how long things were taking, the Euphorian fight took me about 20 minutes, mainly because I'm just waiting around to regen. Upon reaching Telos' service, I have the joy of using fist-only Bayodur since he cannot be a Jedi yet. However, he is the easiest person to turn into a Jedi, so we'll be doing that quite quickly. Completely unrelated, I really did enjoy Force Whirlwind here since it looks odd when it launches enemies, and sometimes when you spin certain enemies they just look really goofy. The main part of the base was also pretty buggy, like I did force push this man to a wall which I thought was quite odd, but my god it got weirder since one of the turrets became sentient and started roaming around shooting us. I've never seen this bug in 20 years of playing this game and I don't think I'm ever going to see it again. However, I was finally at the point where I wasn't constantly running out of force points after every fight, but that's probably because Bayodur is actually kicking things every now and then. My reward for being happy is I get to meet my favourite NPC in the entire game, and I have to use him in order to get some Bayodur influence, and you can just see how well this goes. Honestly, while moving him, I was tempted just to start eating my own keyboard just because of how miserable and long it took. Doing the boss fight here took absolutely forever, and for some reason, instead of my companions being with me at the start, they just randomly teleport in to help me at the end. The one benefit of this area, however, and using force powers, is that I can use Disable Droid, and my god, it made the HK fight in the polar region an absolute joke. I mean, just look at how quick this happened. It turns out while spamming through conversations earlier in the game, I made my lightsaber red, which definitely isn't foreshadowing what Atris will become later in this game. I then decide to spar the handmaidens, and you might be questioning how I do that considering I can't use force powers in some of the earlier fights. Well, it's simple, I just pushed them off the map using my feet. However, in the final stage, they decided to learn how to teleport, which scared the shit out of me since I didn't think I was going to be able to beat them, and I didn't save, and if you fail once, you can't redo it. I then meet the woman who's going to be integral for my build. If you know what she gives you later, then you know what I'm on about, and if not, that's a nice teaser for later. But before I leave, I return to TSL to get some more HK parts before training Bayodur to be a Jedi before I've even left Telos.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Making him my second Jedi companion in the entire game. I really felt like spicing up this run, so instead of starting on Nar Shaddaa, I start on Dantooine for a change, and I decide to go to the cave for crystals for my lightsaber that I haven't yet got.
What?
Upon reaching the main area, I use my tactic of running around and occasionally using Whirlwind in order to dwindle down the health of enemies before I can get the crystals for my sabers. Before making my way to the Enclave, I go back to the Ebon Hawk to fight Visas, who AI breaks when I decide to talk to HK-47. But after about 5 minutes of spinning her in circles, and she gets so dizzy, her lightsaber breaks and I collect her parts. The important bit here was I now have another Jedi companion, so I'm not forced with having Bayodur. Also, as a side note, she comes with some dark side powers, just like Kreia, and because I've not unlocked them, they are allowed to be used. In the Enclave, however, I save Joron because saving him will let me get the rest of the lightsaber parts to build my lightsaber. The main thing about getting this is I can then use the power Throw Saber, which in turn lets me guarantee hit an opponent no matter what. And it will be my most used move in the entire run. In the Enclave, I glitched out the bugs that started running around like dragons. The worst thing about this area, however, is the Lagrics actually do have passive health regen, which means when I do 3 damage and I recover 2 health, I'm only doing 1 damage. So if my force powers run out, they will regain all their health before I can take them down again. My reward for fighting these things for about 20 minutes is I get to run into Disciple as a companion. If you don't know, I hate Disciple mainly because of his endless cutscenes. But before sending him off to the Shadow Realm, I decide to make him become a Jedi since like Bayodur, you can do it very quickly. With Disciple, you just talk to him and praise him and he'll become a Jedi for you. But if there's one man I hate more than Disciple, it's Master Rook, who I decide I need to go save now. Obviously, he belittles me for doing this before I run into Conquest. Conquest wants us to help kill all the people in Kunda, and I decide to say no, and I get jumped by all his men. Whilst being jumped by his men, they mention how you guys haven't yet got me to 2,000 subscribers quick enough. The reward for getting me there quite quickly is I'm going to do another KOTOR challenge, which is 10 times more miserable than all the ones I've done previously. so please make my life worse by hitting the subscribe button. But after running in circles repeatedly, I then decide that after spinning them to death, I can go to Kunda and start setting up their defenses. I also decide to recruit some people, which you can recruit the merchant outside, Joron, and the woman who's the little tour guide you meet at the start who no one ever talks to. After the battle outside, where I just spam saber throw repeatedly, I then get to fight Conquest himself, which obviously goes quite easy like normal. And with that, I'm rewarded with getting to learn a new technique with Rook, who teach me about Force, which is one I won't use since the level 12 version is so much better. But after being belittled, Dantooine is done. But before I go to the next planet, I talked to Kreia about becoming a Jedi Watchman, and in my head I did this, 1 because Jedi Master is awful, but 2 because you get sneak attack. In my head I was hoping sneak attack would trigger if I stun people and use throw saber, but it doesn't, so this was a waste of time, and is a build that I waste on multiple characters. I decide I'm finally strong enough to deal with the shenanigans that is Nar Shaddaa and the endless enemies it's going to give me, and I start by going to the docks by accident, which is going to cost me a bit of time in this run. However, in the docks I go out my way to fix the pylons and get a good reward before going to the cantina. This is mainly so I can give Handmaiden an outfit that young me absolutely adored. But more importantly, I do this so I can rob Voga's vault. After that, I make my way to the refugee sector, where I learn that if you've already spoken to Lutra, then you get some unique dialogue with the guards at the entrance. When I was in this fight and I was freezing people, it's when I realised sneak attack in fact did not work, so my entire plan and build was ruined, except I forgot to incorporate this with Atten and Mira later. And yes, that's a spoiler, I'm going to be getting Mira later. But with the Red Eclipse fight being triggered and clearing out the ship, and I show the snowball effects of the Force powers, since I've gone from struggling to kill 1 enemy to killing about 10 so quickly. After killing the US government, since they're all snake people, I'm now at level 18, which lets me spar with Handmaiden. The important thing is that you get a unique feat after beating her 3 times, which essentially adds your wisdom modifier to your defense, but only if you're wearing robes or clothing. So even though I'm going to lose some upgrades from using the armor, I'll have higher defense overall, which is a bit more beneficial. And a minor side note, I can now make Handmaiden a Jedi, which is always great, since more Jedi companions are needed. After doing all that, I can then start the second half of the planet, which locks me in for the rest of the few hours that's going to come. Basically, I meet a redhead woman before playing as Atten, and I'm having a great time with 2 mentally unstable women. My exile then gets drugged and she runs away, so I'm going to hunt her down like Joe Goldberg and decide that she's going to be a victim of my new cult called Being a Jedi. I break into the bar and kill some aliens and steal their drugs. I then find the kids from Doctor Who and then killing them to avenge my childhood nightmares. I go sprinting around the tunnel so I can get another plasma torch because I love them so much. And Mira is quite weak, and after missing a dart shot, she then stuns herself with a grenade. And I do my tactic once again of running in circles and shooting him until he dies. After that, I look at the average animal control center before freeing my exile, who's able to kill everything else in the area. In my most hated Nar Shaddaa section, Theodore and Kreia actually got the memo and decide to just force wave everything until they die. In the T3 section, I see Squidward cosplaying as Mr. Krabs before stealing some codes and getting to do an even worse section of Nar Shaddaa, since my companions are also weak. However, Atten in fact has the power of anime and Jesus on his side, since he just refuses to die in this area and just keeps getting up. Unlike my previous challenges, I don't actually send the droids to the yacht for that permanent free dexterity upgrade and just stick with using the Force. As always on the yacht after freeing my exile, I decide to do my favourite trick with the minefield, and this one dude scared the shit out of me by storming through all the mines without actually dying. As punishment for his treason, I decide to blow up the ship before talking to Handlebar Mustache Man. As a kid, I always end up killing him since his options are really hostile unless you do a certain dialogue chain, which will let him teach you a nice little Force move that no one's ever going to use. Once aboard the Ebon Hawk, Mira rejects me and breaks my heart, so I force her into a cult, and with that, Nar Shaddaa is done and I can move on to the next planet. In this run, I was just filled with mixing the planets up, since instead of doing a Dantooine, I decided to do Korriban next. And this was mainly because it was 4 AM when I was doing this and I just did not have the Dantooine storyline in me. But in the Sith Academy here, all the Sith assassins were resisting my Force powers, which scares me, since how is the endgame going to play if I can't even do the mid-game? Unlike my last video where I was given endless robes in this area, I'm given nothing but junk. I want to end my life once more. Honestly, the Academy just plays out like usual, except I'm just getting resisted half the time, so the fights attacks just take a little longer, but my force powers are also never ending. Cyan as always is the pillar to see how bad or good my build is, and I get absolutely stomped before running away. I make my way to the cave, and specifically the tomb, where dark side exclusive items are just being thrown at me 24/7. But my god, where are the light-sided ones? In the actual tomb, however, you have an issue, since if you're light-sided, your force points regen extremely slowly, if not at all. So that means when I run out of force powers, I have to run around in circles before I can hit anyone again. Luckily for me, I had gotten force body, which means your health will get used instead of some force points, and the total cost of a force power will be lessened, and it was my best friend here, since otherwise I was never getting through this area. When I destroy the mines, the Republic actually kill all of the Mandalorians without my help, which was a welcome change of pace since I'm used to being let down constantly. When fighting my party, instead of listening to apathy is death, I decided to just force wave people, and they all happened to die, which was absolutely fantastic. When fighting the old version of myself, however, I decided to use force wave in order to slow down myself before throwing my lightsaber at him constantly until he eventually dies. And to no one's surprise, this is exactly the same method I use when going against Revan. But once again, unlike my last videos, I get no useful items, and at this point I'm genuinely starting to tweak because of how bad my luck has been with loot. But as a wise man once said, when they go low, I go lower. And my god, the game decided it was going to trigger the HK factory thing for me, so I had no choice but to play this later, just in case I didn't think I was being miserable enough. Last but not least, we finally do have Dantooine and Onderon to do. And at this point, I decided if I find any more darts, I'm going to simply kill Mira. She's not Luke Littler, I do not need any of these darts. When I make my way to the Mandalorian camp, I agree to do the obvious tasks, mainly going to the battle circle to do my running into people methods. However, the sergeant blocks me off and he tries to cuck me. Then I quickly make myself the richest man in the galaxy before I go to save Kuvmos from starving to death and learning beast control.
That's a surprise tool that can help us later!
After that, it's going through the normal tasks like killing all the scouts, killing a beast for its ear, and finishing off the battle circle. With Dantooine wrapped up pretty quickly, the Sith ambush triggers. And young Dravel, the Mandalorian I didn't kill this time, scares most of them off instantly by charging straight into battle. Once again, I've gone rogue with my decisions. I decide to bring Visas to Onderon with me, mainly since I never give it any love in these runs. It's here where I save Deadeye Duncan after he decides to do some side quests like journalism. Naturally, then I speedrun through the entire story like normal, since the most exciting part here is just killing a bunch of thugs. But after speeding through the story and saving a bald man, I'm told that someone stole his disc with some questionable material on it. So on my way to collect them, I kill a woman and see that he in fact did have the worst material on his discs.
Just an old message.
Naturally, I blackmail the man in getting my meeting with the Master Jedi Kavar. After being rudely interrupted, I kill all of Vaklu's men before running from the city. When I've returned to Dantooine and my ship, I get to watch Disciple play hide and seek like I was doing at the start of the game, before I send my 3 most trusted people to the Dantooine tomb. I send Baodor mainly because he can do the sensor, and he can also do the droids and turrets to make this section so much easier. I've had bad luck with the loot the entire game, and the puzzle boxes did not change this since... well, my god, look at the loot I've been given. The fight with the Sith was going to be a make or break moment for me, because, well, they normally are. And I won't lie, we were both just glass cannon builds. I mean, they stomp at and into the ground, but luckily for me, I get some stuns off and they then fall quite quickly. But if they hadn't been stuns, they would have probably killed me. And it may have taken all the planets, but I finally got a useful item that I can use for the last 10% of the game. On Onderon, I meet this guard who tries the Jurassic Park method of not moving so they don't die. After that, I get myself a pet Sith Lord. Having my own pet, I get to see what the average UK dog show looks like before getting my first useful robe of the entire run. With my luck in, I decide to do the door puzzle to get some more items, because as a true gambler I know it's go big or go home since I'm on that winning run. After resisting the urge of ending my own life once again, I go meet the dog from earlier before using my favourite force power in the entire game. I then get to go into the final showdown with Vaklu, which goes as great as all the other fights have been going. To be the nice guy that I am, I convinced the Queen to let him live for some light side points and for some Kreia influence lost, since I've not seen enough of that this game. But with Vaklu spared, all the planets are now completed. Now, since I've had such great luck with this run, you'll be not surprised to learn that my OBS in fact lost all my footage from Dantooine all the way until the TSL station. But you can guess it played out exactly as normal, with Kreia wiping the Masters and my party, and then Handmaiden struggling against her sisters but stunning them all, and then quickly wiping Atris before I also wiped Atris. I then also did the HK Factory, and to show how little I cared about it, I auto-leveled of all things just to get through it as quick as humanly possible. Upon being on Telos, my force powers are far too much for the average man to handle, and I stormed through it really quickly before boarding the Ravager. Obviously here I'm forced to take Mandalore once again, and he's just going to be punching and kicking things since he actually has no force powers. Upon going through the Ravager, Visas finds her cell in which she hears creepy voices which tells her to commit a terrorist attack and bomb the ship into oblivion and kill her ex. So after planting a bunch of bombs and meeting her ex, Visas decides to show him this cool trick of spinning in circles like we did to her earlier in the game. At the start of the fight I was actually quite worried since Nihilus wasn't actually getting stunned or taking a lot of damage to begin with, but once he did get stunned once, we could just hit him a couple of times before reapplying the stun. Obviously, since I said Visas got this shock ability before I picked it, she can use it and she shocks him to death. And like any abusive man, he's not used to people fighting back. But like a true toxic man, I decide to convince Visas to manipulate Nihilus, and after shaking her head rapidly, telling him no for the first time, he gets dramatically weaker, which means I can stun him easier, and we just throw him into a wall and throw sabers repeatedly until he dies. Upon his death, I tell Visas to steal his mask so I can get a couple more force points before making my way to the final planet of the game. Ah yes, we have Malachor, and the last planet of the game, and this is where we can use that surprise tool we save for later, since if I use Confused Beast, then I can make the Storm Beasts fight each other for my own entertainment, and it makes it a bit easier without me having to do multiple things at once. Also, I can use this later on in the Sith Academy to make the Storm Beasts fight the Sith that are located inside. The issue with having Mira is that I'm then forced to fight Honha once again, but like with every fight, it's me stunning and throwing my saber. The issue with Mira is because I actually leveled up her Scout to get Sneak Attack, which I can't use, she has very little force points, so I need to run around in circles to regain them due to his giant health pool. When I'm back as my exile, the giant Storm Beast fight is about as exciting as every other fight in the entire game. But it's not as exciting as the remote section where I get to run around to every terminal to turn on the mass shadow generator, where the only part that actually got my heart racing was where I found this one Storm Beast that was perfectly plopped right into the middle of the area I needed to go to. I don't know how I missed him, but at least it made it a bit more exciting for me. I then got my favourite Atom glitch, where I don't instantly trigger the fight with Sion, which allows me to buff up before having to fight him so I can make sure that he lives. To no one's surprise, I'm once again using Throw Saber until eventually he falls to the ground and Atom can run away. In the academy, I decide to really take the piss and just decide to test out my defense to see how strong I truly am, and it's pretty ridiculous since all the enemies can't really hit me due to the wisdom making my defense so high. Secondly, my wisdom's also that high that they can't resist my force powers, so I'm essentially untouchable and unkillable, whilst being an absolute killing machine, all whilst just using Force Wave and Throw Saber repeatedly. Making my way through the academy, I saved my party from dying before forcing the Sith to fight each other for my own entertainment once more. Also at this point of the game, I'm at 50 wisdom and I know I can get higher, so I'm a little upset I really didn't push this high enough. But once again, I'm upset by getting another item I can't use, and I finally get some light side exclusive gear 20 hours into the run. My reward for this is I get to fight Sion, who just like Nihilus is just stun and throw repeatedly until he gets defeated a few times. At this point, I really wasn't enjoying the challenge since there was just no fun and there was no risk of me ever dying due to my high defense and stun locking abilities. But yes, after the 4 rounds with Sion, he decided he'd rather die than keep doing this battle, and I was jealous when he fell to his knees and ended his life. And that just leaves Kreia, so once we have our lovely conversation, I decide it's going to take me about 8 years to actually beat her, so I decide to go loot some bodies, just for a bit of entertainment. And I'm once again given light side exclusive items, which is my breaking point. Even the bodies you're never going to loot realistically are mocking me. So I punish Kreia for this by absolutely stun locking her and throwing sabers. Clearly she learned from me though, since she spawned 3 of her own, which then I got to discover something new once more. See, force confusion makes enemies fight each other. However, I didn't think this would work on the lightsabers. This was where I was clearly wrong, since I forced them to fight each other. And after forcing them to fight each other, I then used the good old German methods and became the Blood Moon itself by killing the victor. And with killing the final lightsaber with a lightsaber throw, I then get to walk off into the sunset with Atten, knowing for a fact that I can beat KOTOR 2 with just using the Force.